welcome.
Good morning, how are you?
I am blessed. I'm anticipating a dynamic presentation, as I mentioned earlier, from a young, articulate, politically ambitious Virgin Islander. So you can introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning to the listening of the audience. Good morning to everyone in St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John, Rhode Island, and diaspora. This is Sarauw, your candidate for Delegate to Congress 2026. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Okay, and tell us what you're aspiring, what position you would like to be in, and why.
Sure. So I'm running for Delegate to Congress. I got here. Interesting thought. Of course, I served 3 terms in the Senate. I have a formal education, BA and Master's in Political Science. And in completing my doctorate degree recently, I should be graduating in December. My topic is how democracy denied, the democratic deficit, and the case of the U.S. Virgin Islands. So we're doing all this extensive research back and forth on the insular cases and the temporary base and the consent decrees and all these things that keep us in a colonial state. I realized that the Virgin Islands had a lot of issues that were not really fully addressed or understood on a federal level. So one day I had this, I'm like, okay, cool beans, and I thought Stacey was running for governor. And I'm like, we've been immersed in all things federal for the past 4 years, writing a dissertation. So if Stacey's running for governor, I think I would best fit the role for Congress, given my formal education, my experience in the Senate, my cultural competence of the Virgin Islands as well. And I made a decision to run for Delegate to Congress, and that's how I ended up here.
That's great. And I'm sure you have reviewed the qualification eligibility requirement based on the U.S. Code. I'm hearing some candidates claiming that they go to the U.S. Constitution. I don't see anything in there about the eligibility requirements to run for delegate to Congress. But are you familiar with the U.S. Code that gives the eligibility requirements?
Yes.
And what is your understanding of to be an inhabitant of the U.S. Virgin Islands in order to run for delegate to Congress from the U.S. Virgin Islands?
What is my understanding?
Be an inhabitant, because some members of the Board of Elections claiming that once you're elected, then you could start become an inhabitant, and I'm like, that's not my understanding.
Well, the code talks about. Our code is kind of loose in defining an inhabitant, and that's always been a point of contention. When you come down after 90 days to go to the Board of Elections, get your your voter's ID and your license, and that determines you to be quote unquote a resident inhabitant of the Virgin Islands. And then you have other parts of the code talks about your domicile. Your domicile is where you reside, and you can't have domicile.
Correct. So what is your domicile?
My domicile is the Virgin Islands.
Okay, and
you don't lose your domicile while you're a full-time MP.
I know that. So my question is this: have you ever not been a domicile of the U.S. Virgin Islands?
Never, ever.
And so, how long have you been rooted without exactly, if you wish to reveal, you're younger than me, way younger. But if you wish to reveal your age, that's up to you. But how long have you been rooted in this Virgin Islands society or community?
I've been rooting since well, I'm 40 years old, if I'm to be honest.
That's very young.
So, yeah, so I would say I've been written for 40 years.
Okay. And so you would say you understand all the current issues. And my question is, how would you describe the state of the territory, and what 5 issues you believe are the most important and must be addressed by the Virgin Islands government?
So one is healthcare. The state of the territory, I would say at any minute the state of the territory is on life support. And one would be the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
So where I'm at, there's a few things. One, we need to, on a federal level, the territory must be included in all things MEP, right? Let's take, for instance, if you need assistive device, you qualify for a device through MEP, the Medical Assistance Program, which is Medicare and Medicaid.
Right.
You qualify for that in 50 states. When you move to the Virgin Islands, because the Affordable Care Act and many other MEP sections of the program doesn't extend to the U.S. Virgin Islands, then you're locked out of the vital opportunity.
Right.
Medical access.
Right.
At that point, 2 would be a TEFRA rebate and the healthcare side. TEFRA stands for Tax Equity Reform and Fairness Act. And the TEFRA rebate is the TEFRA law actually was passed, I think, in 1972 and 1980. We have yet to address our TEFRA rebate issue for the hospital. For the hospital, the reimbursement is very, very low. And what is actually burdening the hospital is actually uncompensated care, which translates to bad debt because we have so many uninsured. We have public hospitals that have to treat you whether or not you could afford services. So that structure alone leaves our hospital at a very, very vulnerable place as well. So I would actually oppose, I would introduce legislation that the particular authority allowing for, I would oppose any reduction to Medicaid and SNAP, which we refer to commonly as food stamps. I want to also push to eliminate the Medicaid cap and secure appropriations for the stabilization of the hospitals and workforce development. And I also want to work with members of both of the aisle to actually mandate full inclusion of the territories in federally funded healthcare benefits. And of course, I said earlier that would also require us to modernize the reimbursement and ensure equity as far as the TEFRA rebasing goes. And also, there are also even into our reimbursement of drugs, right? We need to address the impacts of the Medicare drug price negotiation program on territory pharmacies and healthcare providers. Pharmacies lose money when you have to give a Medicare patient insulin, right? Insulin may cost $10 for the reimbursement, maybe $8. So pharmacies are actually losing money for those that actually fall on a donut hole or on the margin, and that strictly only happens in the territories because we haven't been included. And that's a long answer for one point. But
well, it's the most important thing to me. If you don't have good healthcare system, really nothing else matters. If you're sick or dead.
Yes, and also even the delivery systems of the healthcare system as well. Now, remember the role of the transitional person in the Virgin Islands is really clearly defined. Remember now, like Title II would have the role of the Senate, Title II would have the role of the executive branch. The role of Congress isn't really clearly defined, which allows me some wiggle room to make the job my own. So what I'm also looking at is how we expand federal support for pharmacy-based care. How do we expand access to even veterans services within the territory? How do we leverage our Medicaid and Medicare policy to support long-term services and ensure the reimbursement reflects the cost of care only in the insular areas? Even using federal relationships and to have public-private partnerships to attract investment in senior care infrastructure. We have an aging population, and the data shows it, but we don't have the infrastructure to support that. So people want to live and age with dignity at home, and we should be able to have some partnerships, public and private, to leveraging the federal dollars to get that done. And even increase, strengthen the public health data systems. Our data systems are outdated. The way that we report the infrastructure and include the territory in the federal health surveillance system. So that would be, it's expensive, but healthcare is very near and dear to my heart. And I realized that we had so many gaps and loopholes on the federal level that we need to really address. So that would be first and foremost what I would target.
And I appreciate you throwing your hat in the ring, because it has made the competition even stiffer. and because it seems like it's going to be very exciting. And I tell you, at this point, we have some brilliant women running for delegate to House of Representatives. It's going to be a tough decision, but I've given everybody an opportunity to come and present their platforms. And I know you will be running as a Democrat. And for that reason, because we have such dynamic, well-qualified candidates aspiring for that position, I changed my registration from Republican to Democrat yesterday. So I want to ask you the question. Why did you change your political part? No, you didn't. You were always registered as independent, right? No party. Why did you change to Democrat?
Well, correction. For the first, in college, I was actually the president of the college Democrat.
Oh yeah, okay.
I moved home and I was a Democrat for 6 years, and then I transitioned from being a Democrat to an independent. And I changed, and I'm to be honest with the public, I changed because I became very discontent with the local Democratic Party at the time. A lot was happening, the unwelcoming. I came home from college fresh, just wanted to just be a part of the process, the system. I wasn't looking for no handout, I wasn't looking for no job, I was already qualified for what I was doing. I just wanted to be a part, I wanted to engage in civic duty and give back. And the part I felt was less.
Okay.
So it didn't really align with my values. I'm a Democrat at heart. I have democratic ideas at heart. But so I transitioned to an independent, served for 3 terms in the Senate as an independent, and actually was the only independent in an all-democratic majority. So,
really?
I always convinced my colleagues, yes. I never said in the minority at all. So I would always crack a joke with my colleagues that I'm more democratic than are you. I would go back and forth and we laugh about it. But I also realized too that if I'm aspiring to run for Congress, and the Congress, of course, is loosely divided down the line between Democrats and Republicans, I couldn't go on a line kind of about 430-something members of Congress. So I can't go into the House of Congress on a line just going with the wind and nothing gets done for the territory. I need to align myself. And I find myself to be more aligned with the democratic ideals of the national party. But I intend to work closely with the Congressional Black Caucus, the Democratic Party, the territories, but not be polarizing to the Republican side, because my job is not to go and just pick a side and stick on a side. My job is actually to do what's best for the territory. So if I have to align myself with 10 Republicans to get a job done for the territory, to me, actually that's why that was the reason why I changed to being a Democrat.
Well, obviously, you're a fighter. You've always been a fighter. You fight for right. And so this question, I think I know the answer to it. But let me ask anyway. Will you be fighting for Virgin Islands residents to be eligible for SSI?
Of course. Without a doubt. That I want to fight. Oh, I think this will give you another platform point quickly, right? Because asking for 5, it take a long time on one. But I will be fighting for SSI benefits. I will also be pushing for whatever the people decide when it comes to the Constitution. I also realize the importance of a Constitution as a policy major.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to shepherd through that Constitution through Congress, which will be our 6th attempt.
Yes.
Also, I want to address you're a retiree, and this is now to me as well. The rum cover over needs to be addressed. I know that we're touting this great accomplishment that the rum cover over 1325 is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this major accomplishment, but coming from economics, something is called the time value of money. And the time value of money means that the dollar will decrease over time.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember, under Governor Turnbull was the first governor to get the extension of the rum cover over rate from 1050 to 1325. And that's in I think Turnbull came, Snyder was 95, Hurricane Marilyn, so Turnbull would be 96, 97.
Mm-hmm.
There's Petersen in 2026. So the rum cover over rate has been the same. Yes, we have gone back to 1050 a few times because it was never permanent. It was an extension always granted to us by various governors. Each and every governor of the Virgin Islands did receive the extension. So for us to, and as you know, the rum cover over 1325 is what we have pledged to the SPV to save the retirement system at 1325. No matter tax structure is based on a dollar value. So even if the cost or the selling of rum increases, the territory will never receive its fair share because we have locked the territory in to 1325. That's like you entering as a teacher at $28,000 and 10 years from now you want a raise. You can't get a raise because the last day you have a permanent salary. So I think it was really like an injustice to the Virgin Islands to lock us into a 1325 rum cover over rate. What we should have done is petition Congress to look back at the rum cover over every 5 to 10 years, look at the market, and add a percentage. So whether or not, when you look at tax sales, no matter what cost the item is, there's a percentage on the tax. So you can always receive that amount of money, that percentage on whatever the cost of the item is. We should have given a rum cover over rate a percentage to be reassessed every couple of years. The Federal Reserve goes back very often and puts the interest rate up, down, in between. So I really, really want to go back and address the rum cover over because for us to be locked into a 1325 rate, which directly impacts the retirement system, I think was not the best decision for the territory. Well,
you have foresight. I'm glad you're looking ahead, thinking of the future. I believe most of us don't think beyond 2 decades. But I'm glad that you look into the future generation. And yes, you're right. The only thing that's guaranteed is debt and taxes. However, change is constant.
We should be our guide. Remember, we put a dollar value to oil when we were producing oil and St. Glory, when we were, refining oil. And I think we have a sense for barrels, no matter how much oil go up or down, the territory never received its fair share on either because we didn't have the foresight to do a percentage. So the tax structure, I know that my opponent on St. Glory is telling me continue to brag about the 1325 but on her lobbying efforts, which I appreciate, but I don't think it was wise.
Well, you all will have the opportunity to debate, and I think both of you have brilliant minds, and everybody will have the opportunity to vet the candidates, which I encourage. I encourage everybody to vet all the candidates and determine for themselves who is most qualified for the position, because only one, you can only choose one in that category. and your ballot.
I
But
hope they choose me.
of course, and I know of course, you invited to come back again for a full session because I'm giving everybody opportunity. I'm giving your political opponents the same opportunity. So it was mentioned about WAPA, and I'm pretty sure that's probably one on your list because it's in the Revised Organic Act that we're supposed to get, what do you call that? Some excise tax on products produced in the territory, and that relates to refining oil. I want to know what's your position with that, and also,
You mean the gasoline excise tax? That's what you're referring to?
yeah, and refining oil, and also it was mentioned by the previous caller who is also seeking that same office, delegate to House of Representatives, about the WAPA situation. I'm not clear exactly, but would you be in favor of privatizing WAPA or having it be taken over by the federal government?
It's funny that you say that. The only senator in the legislature at the time to actually put in reforms for WAPA was me. I moved legislation to change the WAPA board
Yes,
to more
I'm
technical
aware.
expertise. Remember the governor took us to court
Yes.
on the matter because the WAPA board was still nothing but cabinet members doing political bidding. Actually, I need to remember the hearing on October 1st, 2019, when Director Lee of IRB told us straight up he zones out after the first 15 minutes because it's very technical, and no offense to him, that's not his wheelhouse. So I realized the board was really sure people are just so like, yes. You know, if you come in a board to solve, I'm quite intelligent, but that's not my wheelhouse. Things like talking megawatts and that kind of thing, I would be last myself. So I realized that the WAPA board needed more technical expertise, and we pushed for that. We also pushed for WAPA to bill. A billing cycle must only be 30 days. I remember when WAPA was giving you bills that were like 60 days, 72 days. All kind of crazy days. We also moved the decision for WAPA oversight and turnaround committee. So my first step, actually, let me go back. We strengthened the PSC. We gave the PSC more oversight. So there's a PSC oversight bill also that I moved, and after I worked very closely with, at the time, Director Cole over the PSC and Attorney Boyd's friend, legal counsel. And my office went back and forth. Many working meetings to get that done and to the subcommittee of energy and infrastructure. And then following that, we moved the water oversight and turnaround committee. The governor finally pushed for it with Anthony Young recently. They issued a report. But my end goal at this time is that we missed the mark years ago. I must have been in high school at the time when I think Southern Energy came in and we voted against it. But I honestly believe at this point in time, Apple needs to be privatized. Yes, I agree with that. And he asked me a question about the gasoline excise taxes.
Yeah.
You didn't use the word correctly, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay, what's the correct terminology?
No problem. But the gasoline excise tax has roughly the federal government owes us some billions of dollars as it stands. I think Judge Hodge was very instrumental in fighting for that when he was Attorney General and Sarah King. That's how far back this thing goes. And we passed numerous resolutions in the Senate asking Congress to reconsider remitting some type of payment to the territory for the gasoline excise tax. And that's something that I have no problem in championing on a congressional level as well. As far as the refinery, given the refinery has had so idle for so long that if I can't stop a private business, government is not there to tell a private business what kind of business you get into. If the refinery is to restart, it needs to restart in a more environmentally safe manner. There needs to be some really strong protocols in place because the cancer rate of deploy is ridiculously high. I would believe there is some effect the refinery because historically speaking, refinery was built, it predates the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. It predates the Air and Water Act. So for a very long time, on St. Croix, the refinery operated without any environmental regulation at all. And of course, it predates the establishment of even DPNR. Remember, DPNR was on Conservation and Cultural Affairs before the reorganization in 1987 and entirely. So if the refinery is to restart, we definitely need to have those protocols in place. But I think it's high time the refinery should go into the direction of public green energy. Green energy is where it's at. It's already this large behemoth of industrial site. But I think that, St. Croix can benefit from high-level green energy plants where the emissions are great, the environmental impact is great, and the carbon footprint is actually dramatically reduced.
Oh, well, I'm glad you're thinking ahead, like I said, straightforward. I know you don't back down from controversial issues and you like to take a position, which I greatly admire. So let me ask you this question. There's been a controversy concerning creating more distilleries of spirits, not rum, spirits. We have two rum distilleries in the U.S. Virgin Islands, as far as my understanding. It's the Diageo and the Crucian rum distillery. However, there's some consideration of having breweries and distilleries of spirits, but there are some environmental issues, some concerns pertaining to that. Have you been keeping up on that matter? And what's your thought?
I have been because remember my former running mate Jelly was married in the Frederick house.
I recall
about a very same issue with the micro distilleries and the prosperity farms in Frederickston.
Mm-hmm.
Where I stand on that is, like I said, we have to find a balance between economic development and how we protect the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't support anything that harms the environment, but at the same time, remember, I'm running for Congress, so I wouldn't be involved in the nitty-gritty of the zoning process
right
between the legislature, DPNR, etc. So I would say that I'm not for or against it. I am for sustainable economic development. So I can't carte blanche just sit here and sit there and oppose.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm for. I would have to see what the agreement says. If a micro distillery regarding spirits have to come before me, say I saw in the Senate, I would have to look at it. I mean, I'm a reader. I would look at the documents.
Mm-hmm.
I would do my investigation. I would ask people to take me to the site. I would call a company and ask them, you take me to the site. What are you doing? I would go and speak to the constituents and the stakeholders. I would hear the options on whether or not it is harmful for the environment or not. So it would be really presumptuous of me to sit here and be like, okay, I'm against it, I'm for it. Everything has to be done in moderation and with balance.
That's reasonable. I think we should hear both sides and get the data. Facts can be verified. And there's this other issue with the some members of the Board of Elections to have the election law amended to allow voters a choice on the day of election whether they want their ballots and votes to be counted manually or electronically. Do you have trust and confidence in this Virgin Islands election system, or do you find it needs some reform? to it?
I would say yes. I would say yes to both. I do trust the system, and the system has worked for me. Now, when I had the Kevin Rodriguez saga, of course, as we know, that was a long saga. The justice, even if the election system at the time I felt, erred on a few things, I still had faith in the democratic system, which includes a judiciary, that the judicial branch was able to actually step in and make a wrong a right. And that's where the balance of government comes in. But I can't be against an election system that actually worked for me, where I was a top vote getter in the 34th legislature, and I was elected consecutively by the people of the Virgin Islands to serve on their behalf. So I don't have any faith in it. I think that there must be election reform, and that comes from the Senate. And I too am guilty of not doing as much as I could for election reform, because in the Senate we tend to say the legislature should be reduced to whatever amount of senators, but the legislature's job is a lot. Having served, I could say firsthand, between trying to save GRS when they have disaster recovery, and on 5 different committees. So every day on the Senate floor with a different subject before you. Then you have budget hearings from July all the way until October 1 to pass a balanced budget. That election reform never really sits at the forefront of the present issues that we have. But we do need a level of election reform. The election code is very, very outdated. So I would say, yes, I believe in the system, but I also would agree that reform is necessary. And hopefully, too, with the Constitutional Convention pushing forth a document that we could get through to Congress, hopefully election reform will also be on that as well.
Well, I want to thank you for this dynamic presentation, and I wish you the best. I know you are hopeful in getting elected. You were elected by tabulators, and it will happen again. Tabulators will be in place, and the voters have a choice. So I'm encouraging all the voters to participate in the election and get all the accurate information, vet your candidates, and you're invited, if you are not already a member of my Facebook group, Virgin Islands Affairs Forum. There you can put your platform. You can virtually interact with constituents, with voters. So anyone have inquiries regarding this presentation today, or you want to share comments, you can go to the Facebook page of WSTX, and you're also welcome to join Virgin Islands Candidates Forum. Once again, thank you. It was a pleasure.
No problem. Thank you for having me, and thank you to those listening and viewing. And I humbly ask for your support. I'm a first in Democratic primary to delegate to Congress. This is General Sarauw, Senator to the Hill.
Be blessed.